We're gonna go to You Made Me Watch, and we had, Eric, 3 patrons who made us watch stuff, or made me watch or 2 things, made you watch one thing. And by
I just wasn't around to watch the other.
Made us watch, I guess I just mean, like, you guys give us a donation, and one of us will allow ourselves to be forced to watch that thing. But Eric wasn't around for all of these things. So we'll start with the one that Eric was around for. And
now we both own a copy of.
We both own a copy of. I have 2 copies right now sitting on my desk. One is a DVD and one is a Blu-ray. Because this was a thing Eric wanted anyway, and went ahead and went and bought. And I ordered one before I realized that. So let's go ahead and get into this a little bit, Eric. Now, this is another one of those things. I should preface this. That we watched weeks ago. So you're going to have to help jog my memory a little bit.
Sure.
So before we even get into this, let's, first of all, this was suggested to us by Neil McCalmont. Thanks a bunch, Neil. We sure appreciate it. And I'm really glad I watched this, because I've not seen any samurai movies, really. And this is part of a massive franchise that I've only ever heard you talk about for whatever reason, because I guess I don't know people that are into samurai movies. And then now that I've heard of Lone Wolf and Cub, it comes up all the time. Like I hear that
so much that you've seen it read is references to Lone Wolf.
He's referencing that, yeah. And I didn't know it, and now that I've seen this, and I keep hearing people talk about Lone Wolf and Cub, it comes up everywhere now.
It's like the once you buy a car, you see your car everywhere. You never knew you were looking for it before.
So this is in adaptation, or I guess I should say, like just taking the footage from 2 of those movies and splicing them together and making a movie for us.
Yeah, basically they took the first film and truncated into like the first like 10 or 15 minutes into the kind of the prologue for this. I guess the first film is a little bit more draggy than the second film, so they just took enough of it to give you context, and then the rest of this film is the second film. In America, this is called Shogun Assassin. In Japan,
did you almost swear, or were you just saying Shogun Assassin?
Shogun Assassin, yeah. No,
when you dropped it, I couldn't decide if you almost swore.
In Japan, they are it's the Baby Cart series. So it's Baby Cart in the River Styx, Baby Cart.
Oh,
something,
really?
something, Baby Cart something something. Yeah. So we come up with the title Shogun Assassin entirely, which isn't even really accurate for what it is, but that doesn't matter because we're stupid Americans.
Yeah, sure.
And obviously the manga series, which I own the first 2 of the like big thick volumes. So I showed you like how big and thick those are, and there's like 11 of those. One day I'll read all of it, because I've heard that if you read all of it, it's amazing.
And you showed me the art from that, and I was really surprised by how faithful this stuff was to the tone of what that looked like.
These came out 2 a year in Japan.
Wow.
So there are 6 of them across 3 years.
And they use those comics in a lot of places as storyboards, it looks like, at least to some degree.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know much about the making of the behind-the-scenes of this film.
I mean, I didn't look at that real close, but there was one scene you showed me that looked like it was kind of adapted to this movie, and I was like, if it's not like straight panel for panel, it's real similar.
Well, the scene where he has Daigoro pick between the ball and the sword is almost shot for shot, and it's written by the writer of the manga.
That's really cool.
The Japanese film. I imagine this is changed a bit for the. So, for anyone who doesn't know, this is a release of a film in America in the 80s where we kind of cobbled together these 2 films and we completely redubbed it, and so there were some storyline changes and things like that. His job, who's after him, is different. Who's after him is not actually the Shogun. It's like a family that's trying to gain favor with the Shogun, is trying to kind of throw some shade on Ogami. So it's not actually the Shogun, but we made the Shogun for simplicity's sake. But it's entirely dubbed, and it's really important to film history in America. There's a lot of people, the big one being Quentin Tarantino, but there was a lot of filmmakers that like this was their introduction to samurai films, and so like even though this is I think one of the rare cases where a dubbed film is almost as legitimate a piece of art just for the importance it has and impact on culture.
Yeah, because it is a different thing than what they use with the same footage there. Like,
and the music
story's not
is
exactly
different.
the same. The music
And you love the music.
I really liked the music in this a lot. I thought it was a wonderful soundtrack.
Sometimes there's no music. Sometimes it's just a cacophony of sound.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting soundtrack.
And it uses the Imperial March a lot, or what sounds like the Imperial March a lot. But I liked how much variety that had. Like, it shouldn't have worked, but it kind of did. Like, it kept jumping to like different kinds of music. Like, it was really strange.
What's interesting from what I do know about the original films is that the original films are a lot more deliberately paced, whereas this makes it more quick cutty and like real. Like kinetic. I like kinetic is a word I would use to describe
frantic.
This film. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in that third act. Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the desert. The desert stuff is just boom, boom, boom. It's all over the place.
So it's so this is the only one that was ever.
Yeah. Sorry. That's I didn't even think of that. That's important. It's not just that some of it's rewritten and we're putting different words in the characters' mouths. It's edited different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's even a credited like American director.
That's weird. Because they probably didn't shoot anything new.
Yeah, I don't... No. Anyways.
So this isn't like Sentai with Power Rangers. Like, it's not like we're shooting new things and adding to it.
No. We're just kind of recutting it so it's a little bit faster paced, a little bit more action-y. Which, I mean, this movie is just non-stop action.
Some story beats. Yeah, but there also is I don't want to say downtime because
there's that whole bathtub scene that you were... you're like, well, why are we watching this? I'm like, I think it's because you're supposed to take away from this that they're constantly in peril and they feel like they're in peril, even though nothing happened this time. Next time it might.
I appreciated that scene more after the movie's over,
because every other moment in the movie, someone's trying to kill them.
Well, yeah, that and just the relationship with this guy and his kid. You're right. Like they're constantly on the run. They're constantly bloodied and dirty, and if you live in a world where all you have to do is poke a person and this much blood spurts out, like, you really need a bathroom.
Yeah, we should also mention it's a super bloody film.
These people, and they revel in that.
It's coming out in like the 70s. Like, we weren't doing stuff like this in the 70s.
These kids this guy and this kid, like, they're on their own. They're basically Ronins. They don't have like a place of their own and a place to go, and so when they take a bath, it's a big deal for them, I'm sure.
Well, and the actor who plays Agami Ito, whose name I do not immediately recall, and I'm not seeing it on the back of the case, but the guy that
they
plays...
do get wet a lot, though. They don't get to take baths that much, but they almost drown quite frequently.
The guy who plays Agami Ito is so... Like, he looks worn down. Like, for the entire film. Yeah. Like, it's like, oh, you sleep like 1 hour a day.
I couldn't believe when you told me how many of these he made, because he looks like he's already made 20 of them.
Like just in sequence. Just never stop making these movies. But, I mean, we are in the second film.
He's so intense. And that's what I was going to say is, it's... There is downtime in that it's not all constant fight, but it's always... A lot of intensity. There's a constant sense of urgency anytime they go somewhere, and like it gets kind of funny, but I still feel for them. Where anytime they go anywhere, I know somebody's going to come out and try to kill them. Like anytime they're anywhere, it's almost cartoony about it, but it knows that. Like, it relishes in that stuff, and at the same time, the characters are playing it straight. So they're always trying to survive, and they could like get killed at any point. But of course, he's like a brilliant tactician, and he's a brilliant fighter, and he's brilliant at everything. So like he probably thinks he's always going to make it out, but he's always fighting for his life, all the time. But like from your comfy couch at home, it kind of feels like you're watching a really violent cartoon where there's just this constant cat and mouse chase. Except it's like one of those like 8-bit NES games where you just walk down a city block, and for no reason at all, everything wants to kill you.
Oh yeah, this is essentially like a live action beat 'em up.
Yeah,
like the side scroller beat 'em up. Like, this is essentially a live action version of that.
And one of the things that's really fun about it is just regular looking people that turn out to be these master assassins that just come out of nowhere. John Wick is looking at these. Like,
oh, John Wick is definitely looking at these. I wouldn't be surprised if John Wick gets a baby to take care of at some point.
With a baby carriage that has a bunch of weapons that come out of it.
Oh my god.
That was the best.
John Wick totally has to have something that's just all guns. Like, it looks like something normal, but it's all guns. That's gonna happen.
It was really cool when that carriage came in, and you said, okay, in the comics, everything on it turns into a weapon. And I think you even said, tell me if I'm laying this on thick. If memory serves, I think you said, I don't think they'll go quite that far. And they went that far.
I don't know if I said they wouldn't go quite that far. I think I was like, I don't think they had the budget to do that.
That's what it was,
but,
yeah. But they did.
But everything comes apart on this, and there's a spear or a sword or something, and the baby presses buttons, and it like pops things out.
Yeah, and they have this really cool unspoken language together where the kid always knows what to do just with a glance from his father.
And that kid actor is great.
He's really
good.
It's
also the most intelligent kid. Obviously, also Hit Girl comes from this.
Of course, yeah.
Although he's like a third the age of Hit Girl.
No, the performance is amazing. I don't understand how an 8 or 9 year old or however old he is.
I think he's younger. I think he's like 6. I think he's like
looks
5 or 6.
younger, but I didn't want to make that assumption. However old he is, it's hard to imagine that he like understands enough about like what would be at stake and again the sense of intensity and urgency, but also this completely different life philosophy and sense of values that these people have. I love things like this where I wouldn't, for my own sensibilities and in my own culture, condone the things they're doing, but I'm rooting for them all the way because it's very easy for me to I'm captivated enough that it's easy for me to get their values and almost for the duration of watching the film embody their values along with them.
Mm-hmm. You get into the culture of it all. It's kind of like Klingon. We're like when you're on Klingon, you get what's going on with Klingon. You know who you're rooting for and who you're not, even though all of it's maybe a little morally deplorable to your own sensibilities.
Sure, yeah.
My favorite scene in the comic, and it's in the movie, and I was like, I hope this scene's in the movie, and I was worried it wasn't, because we spent like 10 minutes and we didn't get the scene. I'm like, oh, maybe they're not going to do that scene. Is where he makes his infant child choose between the life of a child and life of an assassin. He puts a sword here and he puts a ball here, and he says, if you go to the sword, you're coming with me and the rest of your life will be death. If you pick the toy, I will kill you and you will go to your mother, because his mother was murdered. And he goes to the sword and he's like, I know you probably don't understand, but you're in for a hard road. And it's such a heightened insanity.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a cultural thing. I think that's just a this is how kind of operatic we're going with this story. I
mean, it's like Spartan hardcore.
Yeah, no, it's like Spartan hardcore. And then the kid's a little bit older when you get to the movie, but if he didn't know then, he now knows the life that he leads.
Oh yeah.
He's all in,
and it's just normal to him.
Oh, and when he narrates, and he's like,
that doesn't totally work.
It doesn't totally work, but sometimes it's hilarious when he's like, my father is, or I keep count, because
yeah.
I forget.
It's good. My father doesn't keep count. I keep count for him. I forget what exactly.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. He says I keep count. I think it's so he knows how many people to pray for or something. I forget what it is. It's something like that. But he's like my father, and we're like, okay, like that's kind of funny. And then goes, my father has killed 364 people. We're like, what? And his dad kills him and goes, 365.
That was my favorite thing. I love how. Here's the thing.
I'm pretty sure that narration does not exist in the original Japanese film at all.
The kid voicing it over is obviously a couple rungs down from the kid playing that part.
It's very strange because sometimes it feels like it's him older reflecting back on his childhood, and sometimes it feels like it is the mind of this child right now.
The thing to keep in mind is that this kid never speaks. He's completely mute, and you get the sense that he's maybe. It's one of two things. He's either not old enough to talk, where maybe it is a 6 or 7 year old playing what's even supposed to be younger than that, and he's just not even old enough to really put sentences together. Okay, it's one of three things. The second thing would be his father has told him not to speak, and that children are to be seen, not heard. The third thing is, and I think this might be the most likely, it might be a Cassandra Cain situation.
I think it's the first one.
It might be language of violence.
I think it's the first one because he's like 3 or 4 in the comics.
Yeah, but let's also keep in mind the dad never speaks either.
Very, very rarely.
He doesn't talk much. So it really does look like that like, and again, I'm bringing extra material to this because this is a thing I've really only seen in Batman, but it really does feel like that's there. It's the language of action. he never tells his son to do anything. And like you said, we know he can speak, but he never actually tells his son to do anything. It's all with a glance. It's all with body language.
And it's magnificently kind of shot and choreographed so that like you get that completely.
It's amazing how well it's communicated, and it's amazing the kind of chemistry they have when they never say anything to each other. And they seem like a unit. Like, it doesn't feel like the dad using the son. It feels like they're completely intertwined.
No, the big scene for me, if you're not completely sure that like the kid is totally in on this and knows what he's doing, is when there's the woman who comes to kill them, and Ogami beats her but doesn't kill her, and then they all spend the night in the barn together. Yeah. And the woman's gonna try and kill Ogami in his sleep, and the kid starts breastfeeding to distract her.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I don't think I realized that's what he was doing.
Okay,
that he was distracting.
Yeah, okay. no, and that's the moment where I feel like it says 100% to the audience, like, no, this kid knows what he's doing.
And if you don't get it there, you get it with the deadly baby carriage. Because he actually kills people himself. He pulls out, and again, the dad gives a glance, and he pulls out the sword, the knife, and yeah.
I love when the cart just rolls, and the spears on it just rolls
into
a guy.
He's just holding it right down the hill. We should mention that there's a special feature on this.
Yes,
with Sam Jackson, who's just obsessed with these movies, and they just interview him because he loves samurai movies and Lone Wolf and Cub. And
they say that he owns like 1,000 Japanese films. He goes, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I do own a lot. Yeah, and that he watches this film at least once a year.
He talks about how he grew up with these movies because it was cheap entertainment when he was living in kind of a slum life. It sounds like, and he and his friends would go to the local cinema. And they would show like 2 or 3 movies at a time. They would do like double and triple features. And,
which is a thing I've heard a lot, because I've always wondered like why is like the samurai kung fu stuff so integrated into the like rap stuff, and it's because we showed those movies like 4 at a time at theaters for like 50 cents, and so you would just go see a bunch of movies.
So if you were poor, you could afford it.
Which is part of why I don't like the whole thing where like we're now taking these movies seriously, so we're selling them for $20 a piece. I'm like, yeah, but they were cheap entertainment. That was the point. But anyways.
And you can't get that experience that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it seems like I liked what I learned about Sam Jackson through that whole thing, because I've always found him fascinating, and I understood even more why he's so much of a working actor, and why, like, it was really weird that he had that feature. We were both like, really? Okay, he's just going to talk about this movie for 20 minutes, and he just explains the movie, like.
Well, and that makes me buy 100%. This is a movie he has watched many times, because he breaks the movie down like scene by scene.
Yeah, he gives you a full-blown synopsis.
If you don't have time to watch this whole movie, look and see if you can find just the Sam Jackson special feature.
Because you'll know what happens in it.
He will tell you the entire movie, and sometimes he'll explain to you things you maybe didn't even get. Like I
was really glad we watched it.
The well, when he talks about the well,
I suddenly understood that, and I don't think he's just interpreting it. I think he's right.
No, he's 100% right. So there's a scene.
Now that scene is amazing and so tense.
Yeah. Like, there's a scene where the bad guys have Daigoro, who's the baby, and he's tied up over a well, and they're like, we're going to drop your kid into this well, and he's going to drown and die. And the kid kicks off his shoe, and we just wait for like a minute, and then we hear it drop, and then Daigoro then Ogami Ito goes and starts killing the guys, and I didn't exactly know why, and then Sam Jackson explains to me, oh, he's telling him how long he has for him to fall, for his dad to kill all these people so he can save him so he doesn't drown. I was like, oh, that's what's happening. That's awesome. So yeah, thanks, Sam Jackson.
At the risk of doing like the really superficial thing with this kind of thing, there's so much of just an escalation of action, because there's so many different like locales and stuff. What was your favorite part? Like, what is your favorite action scene of this movie?
Probably that well scene. I really like that. The final scene is I like the final showdown in the desert. It does feel like it's just another episode. It does not feel like a conclusion. I felt like the movie could have kept going. It doesn't.
Sure, yeah.
Plotline-wise, we've kind of been building to that, but like those guys didn't feel any more or less dangerous than anybody else we fought throughout the film.
That's true. I guess maybe there's supposed to be more of a sense of finality just because you have more thematically than anything, where you have these guys that are trying to kill him, but they have so much respect for him because he's been able to do things with the martial arts that no one has ever been able to do before. And so you have that guy who is like in that scene, who's like excited to be killed by him because he gets to see a thing that no one has ever seen before.
Yeah.
And so
I always wanted to see what that cut looked like.
I guess that doesn't give you a sense of finality, but I'm glad if the movie is going to end in some random place, we don't have that in a previous action scene.
I also love the fight with the chick that just starts laughing. That one's great. Where she just has that like cackling evil laugh.
Yeah, she's nuts.
Oh, it's hilarious.
There's certainly gender equality in this.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone's a murderer.
We are, and everyone murders everybody else. We are not concerned. At no point does he blink an eye at eviscerating a woman any more than he does a man. And anyway, yeah, and like I was talking about how, in your culture you wouldn't condone his actions, but like they don't condone his actions in their culture either. He has very much his own code. Like,
yeah. Well, it's a heightened universe to some degree.
Yeah. But, like, it does a really good job at the beginning, and obviously a lot of this is the original material, but I'm glad that they kind of truncated that origin so we didn't have to sit through the whole origin, because that plays as background material to show you, like, even as heightened as this whole world is, because, it's a comic book. I mean, this is, as heightened as it is, he still needs a really extreme starting place, impetus, before he becomes this guy. Because compared to everyone else, he still is like really extreme. He's a really extreme personality.
You know what else this is probably an influence on? Ninja Turtles.
I had that thought.
Didn't we? There's a guy. Isn't there a guy that has like a Shredder helmet? There was something where is like, oh, that's where Ninja Turtles got that. I think.
Yeah, and it makes you wish that they looked more at this when they actually went to feudal Japan.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it couldn't have been as bloody because we were already in the mode of like making those more for kids. But,
yeah.
I adored this. I'm glad I finally watched it.
And this isn't exactly my kind of thing, but I was captivated by it. I really like this. I mean, I think I might watch another one or two of them.
Yeah, and for people,
certainly really interesting as a piece of history, if nothing else. But I was also very entertained.
For people that are interested, there are two versions. There are two ways to watch this series. There is Lone Wolf and Cub. You can get a Criterion box set of all 6 films, but then there's also a box set of Shogun Assassin films. So this comes out, and then a couple of years later, someone puts out Shogun Assassin 2. That's the 3rd Lone Wolf and Cub movie, and apparently it's just like kind of straight dubbed and is not good. And then years later, someone comes back and does the last 3 movies. And they dub it like this, and they re-edit it like this, so that it feels like these movies.
And it is its own piece.
So, I think you could probably watch both or either and get 2 completely different experiences. Yeah. Because I think Shogun Assassin is a different thing than Lone Wolf and Cub, kind of. As much blood and violence as there is, I think Lone Wolf and Cub is probably a little bit more artistic. Not having seen the original film, but having read some of the manga.
Is that title any less redundant than Ninja Assassin?
Yes. Shogun is... So the Emperor is the guy that's technically in charge of Japan, but Shogun is the guy who's
Is he the guy with the eyebrows?
Yes, he is the Shogun.
He's hilarious.
He's the one who's... Yes, he is. He's the one who's actually in charge of the country. I'm trying to think of... The Emperor is kind of like the Queen in England, and Shogun is kind of like the Prime Minister.
Okay.
And Shogun Assassin is what he was, where he was the guy... When people were murdered, or when people committed seppuku, he was the official guy that chopped off people's heads because if you didn't do it right and you were going to suffer, they chop off your head. It's a more honorable death. So he was the guy who did that for the Shogun. So no, Shogun Assassin is kind of right.
It's like kind of an executor, but almost like a humane executor, where like because they're
Shogun Executioner would be a more apt title, I would think. But
I mean, as a terrible title.
Well, so the guy who does this, Kazuka Koike, who did the comics, does have another series called Samurai Execution.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's also
I just didn't think those words went together, but I guess that's not it. But is that any more or less silly sounding than just putting anything in front of Assassin, I guess? Like, because when I saw Ninja Assassin, I was like, that is a really stupid title because I wasn't familiar with this world at all. I mean, the world of like samurai in like classic samurai ninja films, and then like the more I've learned about that kind of stuff, the more I'm like, oh no, they called it that because
remember,
of things like this.
Japan is the place where like bad guys in shows are like Lord Death God.
Yeah,
you know, and things like
back then I was not familiar with that.
Yeah,
stuff, although I didn't know that.
But yeah, it's quite good.
It's really good. More of that came to me than I thought it would, which tells you how captivated I was by it. I thought it was really, it was really interesting to watch. Okay, so I've got a couple more things
I was not here for
that I'm going to talk about on my own. I'm here for just a little bit. So Jeffrey Patron, who is going to be on the show a little bit later talking to me about They Might Be Giants, he donated in order to have me talk a little bit about a documentary that he likes a lot, about a band called Wilco, which I wasn't familiar with, had never heard before. Have you ever heard of this band?
Not
or heard anything by this band?
This documentary. Maybe I've seen it work. Like the name sounds maybe vaguely.
Yeah, so they are both. I mean, I guess less so than they were before. They're alternative and underground, but also really important and influential. And I guess they have that in common with They Might Be Giants. And they command, or at least they did at the time that this documentary came out. And I don't know anything about their history after that, of course. And this came out in I think 2002. Part of the reason that Jeffrey asked me to do this was because this was made almost at the exact same time as the They Might Be Giants documentary, Gigantic. And anyway, they commanded, at least at the time, much larger crowds than the Giants. They talk about how they didn't really necessarily have to have a record label to make money, where they started, and this gets into what the whole movie's about, but they start wondering, like, do we really need to be part of the big machine in order to make money? Because we command big enough crowds, we could just live on concert tickets. We don't. Really, I don't know that They Might Be Giants has ever been popular enough to be able to do that, where they can just live off concerts. But anyway, so, like I said, this is a really experimental alternative band that's been evolving a lot over time. I listened to, in preparation for this, their first album, and then samples of 3 or 4 other things, including the album that this is about, with a track called I'm Trying to Break Your Heart, which I think is lovely. I think it's a wonderful song, and that's the name of the documentary, is I Am Trying to Break Your Heart.
Okay, I thought the documentary was just called Wilco.
Which plays on a couple of levels with the film. It's a really thoughtful movie. It's a really well made documentary that has a real honest to God story, beginning, middle to end. You could dramatize this and tell a really good story, I think. But it's it starts as just your kind of standard, well, let's see what this band is like in the studio putting an album together. And their record label, Reprise, allows them to, and it's really interesting. At first, they love the record label. They allow them to make a record all on their own without telling them anything about it in their own loft outside of a studio. And they seem to trust them enough after some previous records. And I guess what I was going to say earlier is they've evolved a whole lot, where their first record sounds to me a lot like a lot of the things, the alternative mid-90s stuff. They sound a little bit like Fastball. They get away from that sound a lot as they move along, and I think they're indescribable by the time they get to this album. I don't know what to even call it. I don't know how to describe it. It's alternative, but it's not like REM-ish. It's just really, and it's not folk songy like a lot of They Might Be Giants, or quirky like that. I wouldn't call them that. It's like I said, it's experimental. They deconstruct their songs. They talk about this a lot. So what they'll do is they'll write a straightforward song, and then in the studio, or in the loft as they were making this record, they deconstruct it so that so they say, well, this just sounds like a standard rock song, or this sounds like a standard folk song, and then they pull it apart and they start trying a bunch of unconventional instruments on the same song. And so they'll be like, well, what if we did this with a xylophone instead of a guitar, or let's pull in something really unusual for instead of using a drum kit, we'll try this other thing. And there's a lot of bands that do that kind of thing now, but I think they were really innovative in that. Like there's a group that I like to listen to some that's primarily a big YouTube group, but I'm trying to remember the name of that group. But they do Walk Off the Earth. Walk Off the Earth does that. Anyway, so they're making this album in their loft, and whoever is making this movie could not possibly have known that this was going to be such a giant ordeal and really important to the music industry. And it watches like a thing that you would have to know the future to even think to make, because it's just Wilco thinks this is going to maybe be the most important album they've ever made, but then you always think that, and they talk about that where they're like, is a really one of the first lines in the movie is a guy, I forget who he is, who says, well, they're really ambitious, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get really good record sales, or that this what I think is this amazing, wonderful work of art is going to be appreciated that way, or go down in history as a really important piece. But then it did, and it also went down in history as a big turning point in the music industry, where a bunch of bands started going, well, maybe we don't really need to worry so much with record labels. So what ends up happening is they make their record and they work on it for an unusual amount of time, like a really long time, and they finally get the sound that they want, and they get it to sound exactly like what they've decided that they want it to be, and they give it to. And like I said, I can't describe this album. You just got to listen to it. And I think it's wonderful. They give it. Oh, and I was going to say they like to put a lot of noise on stuff. Like I Am Trying to Break Your Heart. They say this song could have been just a real standard kind of folk song, and then we started putting all this weird noise on it, and it gives it this really interesting sense of ambiance. I don't know how they thought to use all the weird sounds that they put in that, and they describe it as just noise. It is. It's just this really weird background where it's almost like they're making a song on like a spaceship or something. It's like falling apart or something. I don't know how to describe it. Anyway, so they give it to Reprise, and the record label doesn't like it, and they say you're gonna have to make changes, but they're really ambiguous and vague, and don't tell them really what they want done with it. And it's clear that they're just not going to be able to use this record with them, and they don't want it. They're happy with it. They don't want to change it, and they've been working on it forever. And so what ultimately ends up happening, to make a long story short, is they say, I guess we're just going to leave. And they leave the label that allowed them to make their own record exactly the way they wanted to, without hearing a piece of it the entire process. It turned out what happened was the guy that I think he was the head of, maybe he wasn't the head. One of the guys at Reprise that was the main person that really believed in them had left, and
that's how it always happens.
And they didn't get them at all. And so they were just like, well, we don't think people are going to understand this record, so you're going to have to change it, or we're not going to put it out. And so they just left. They were hoping that other record labels would want them, and apparently they shopped it around for a long time. They just started playing shows, and they played a lot of the songs on that record at a lot of shows, and people started becoming familiar with it, and their diehard fans would come to the show, and they said the lead singer, Jeff, he says, I think that's his name, he says, at least we could tell the front row was lip syncing, like knew all the words, and it had gotten around town, and like everybody knew about it, like a lot of people had heard it, and so suddenly they were getting a bunch of record labels interested in it. They had like 30 that were that wanted to sign them.
Oh, interesting.
I forget the name of the label, but the one they finally end up going with, and I don't know who they're with now, or if they're even with a label now, because a lot of these bands just don't even need one now.
Yeah.
And of course, this was just before like the music bubble kind of burst, right? Where that's not the main way you make money anymore with music anyway. But they end up going with a label.
At this point, from what I understand, it's mostly tours. That's where you make your money. Yes, concerts and things like that.
Exactly. So this is hilarious. The parent company of Reprise is Warner Brothers. They end up signing with another record label that is under Warner Brothers. So they effectively like kick them in the face, right? So Warner's pays all this money for a record that they end up not releasing, and then they buy it back for a lot more money than you know they had to in the first place, and it was hilarious. And that ended up changing a lot of things about the industry, where a lot of bands saw what happened with that, and they started taking more risks. And this ended up being like a really important story that I can't believe somebody was already making, you know, this documentary before all that ends up happening.
That's really cool.
It's not the kind of documentary that's about it doesn't have a whole lot of people like being interviewed talking about the band. It's not like the history of this band or the history of these people. Like, there are interviews, but much more of it is just day in the life, traveling around, or not day in the life, but like just following the process of this being put together. The documentary I've seen that's most like this is Indie Game the Movie, where there's a story about a project from beginning, middle, and end to starting the project to completion, and it's all about how difficult it is to get the product out and the hurdles you have to jump in the industry.
Yeah, I was going to say, it almost
happen.
sounds like a not parody, not fictional, like Spinal Tap.
It is a lot like that, yeah. But it's a microcosm where it's about this like one particular period where Spinal Tap, if memory serves, was like.
No, it's about them in that specific period.
Oh, is
they
it?
talk about their history,
longer,
but it's them on this one tour.
And they talk about their history here, too, of course. They're very different from the Giants in that it's it's really collaborative in the writing and stuff between all the guys in the band, but there's one guy who was drummed out of the band or left, and of course everybody has kind of a different story about what exactly happened, and you're kind of left to make up your own mind about how you feel about the egos involved, and especially the lead singer, and whether or not he really has like a my way or the highway attitude, or if that guy just wasn't fitting in anymore, or what exactly it was. But I was really invested in it as a story, and I think it's fully watchable even if you've never heard their music before, because it's just a really good story, and it's a really good music documentary in that it takes the time to just stop and let you hear what the songs sound like, which I really appreciate. And it doesn't hurt the momentum, because it's always really logical where we're talking about how we're putting together a piece, and or what the spirit of these people are involved in this song, and why it sounds the way it sounds, and that kind of thing, and then we actually get to like live with it and hear what they're talking about, and I really appreciate that. I also thought the lead singer, I think he's a really fascinating character. He's a classic artiste type.
Oh,
in that he seems really socially awkward to me, and these are all things that I can glean just watching it. There's not somebody coming out, narrating, telling me about who these people are and what they're like.
He was really socially awkward.
I mean,
in the classic artiste model.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm saying that because I'm reviewing something. But he, I
want a documentary where someone says that, and then he's just like, ooh, ooh.
There's this really uncomfortable, like 3 to 5 minutes just completely uncut right after a show where he's talking to some people backstage or in like a green room or something, and he's talking about like they're asking him, frankly, some of them kind of some dumb questions, and he's just not having any of it, and like you get a really good sense of his mannerisms and how he is in a professional setting, and how he doesn't like BSing and ass kissing and that kind of thing, and he won't make eye contact with anyone, and he's one of these guys who communicates through his writing, and he doesn't communicate well off the cuff, and it was like I said, I felt like I really got to know these people. But yeah, so I totally get why Jeff wanted me to watch it. He also He also said, when I talked to him the other day, and I thought this was really interesting, that one of the reasons he wanted me to see it was because the lead singer of this band was at a major crossroads where he was about to start this huge project and thought that it would be maybe the most important thing he ever did, but he also had just had a kid and his life was changing a lot, and he said,
well, that's not relevant at all.
I've got another baby on the way and I'm about to start Batman year, and that's why he thought of it. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Alexa, I said Batman year. I said what else did I say that maybe might have made her a thing? Crossroads. No.
Another baby on the way.
Another baby on the way. No. Anyway, I'm not sure why Alexa is trying to talk to us, and why she's not now. So anyway, Jeffrey, thanks a lot for sending me that and asking me to review that. I thought that was a wonderful documentary. I was really impressed with it. And then the other thing that I need to talk about was sent by David Crabtree. It is a Michael Bay film. Yeah, he sent me a Michael Bay film called 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. And this is based on a true story. And this came out... What's up?
Before you actually get into the movie, I want to talk about...
Just a couple years ago. This is 2016.
I want to talk about the cover because I've seen this movie a lot at work.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
It looks like it's The Punisher, right? I can't think of his name.
Yeah.
It's not him, but like I'm like, oh, it's a movie with I
can't remember his name right now. You're talking about the current Punisher.
No. I'm talking about the one from the like 03 movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I could see the new guy in that role too, but yeah.
Well, whenever I see that picture, I'm like, oh, he did like a soldier movie. No, he didn't. I can't think of his name. He was also in The Mist. I can't think of what his name is. But whatever. But that's James Masdale, who's in Iron Man 3.
As
he's the heavy. He's the bald guy who lights up red, and
I can't even picture him right now. Like I know what you're talking about, but I'm not even picturing him in that movie. Anyway, so I think David wanted me to look at this because he thought he had seen a decent Michael Bay movie, and he wanted me to see what Michael Bay's sensibilities were like in a more serious film that he was. That was like, you know, real heartfelt and close to him, that he really cared about.
Because we know that Michael Bay is real close with the American U.S. military and cares a lot about soldiers and things like that.
Yeah, and so of course there's not any nonsense here. There's not any gimmicky stuff to try to make it really accessible. It's a very different kind of thing. Now you can definitely tell it's Michael Bay making this movie, and I don't love the way he makes movies. I don't love his directing style. I think his style is appropriate for this. There's still a lot of stuff that's a little bit too close where I wish I had a better sense of what was going on. I don't totally understand why he feels the need to quick cut edit everything as heavily as he does. We're just constantly cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
And I don't love that. But
see, that's probably like a learned habit. Where like that made a lot of sense when he started out and he was making like Bad Boys and The Rock and things like that's how you would cut a movie like that. That's how you cut Transformers. It might just be like an unfortunate learned habit when he's trying to do something more serious.
Sure. But I do think, like I said, it fits this material better than it does something like Transformers and anything family-friendly. You know, certainly. But the most impressive thing about this movie, and I'll just say, this is not for me, and I don't fully appreciate this, admittedly, as much as I would if I had more family in the military or if I was in the military. Now, my brother was in Iraq. He doesn't talk about it a whole lot. I haven't spent a lot of time with him since he went there, and so like I have a cursory appreciation of that.
But it's not a constant thing.
I'm not going, and that I'm constantly thinking about. I'm not going to even begin to pretend like I know anything about serving my country in that way. But this. This felt really real. The most impressive thing about it to me is that it doesn't feel like they went on location somewhere. It feels like they went to Benghazi and shot a movie. And that's really impressive. There's a thing that Michael Bay does at the beginning of this that I hate, that he almost gets away with, but nobody can get away with, and I wish he hadn't said it, because it comes off as real pretentious, and I think just disingenuous. Instead of saying based on a true story, it calls itself a true story.
Ooh.
This is a true story. No, it's not. Someone wrote dialogue that these people probably didn't say when they were there. And biopics need to be biopics, not biographies, right? Not documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
If this was a documentary, that's fine. Say this is a true story. You're filming the stuff that's actually happening. But it's more difficult to... Here's the thing. I didn't look into any of the background on this at all.
And I think you can get away with that more if you don't rearrange anything for, like, Hollywood structure.
Well, yeah.
Like you do with a biopic.
Well, and what I was going to say is, I have to assume that happened here. Maybe beyond just dialogue they made up, everything in this is 100% accurate, and like they based it on some kind of like biography or history or something, and it's like exactly what happened. But any way you slice it, it is a recreation. And if I were to find out, like I have a lot of biopics that I love, where people say, well, "Yeah, but Cap, it's." It was watered down a lot. It made someone seem like a much better person or seem like a much worse person, etc., etc. I always feel justified in still loving what I loved because it works as a fictional narrative. This comes out and says it's not. And so if I heard, again, I haven't looked up anything, but if I heard, here's all the things that this movie gets completely incorrect, that's more problematic with a thing like this. There are some family bits at the beginning that I thought were a little bit typical, where it seems like, I don't want to say it's like emotionally manipulative or anything, but it's just the kind of like, you know, almost cliche way we tend to dramatize relationships, particularly with soldiers and wives. Where, like, again, if I found out that's exactly the way that happened, but it's dramatized for a Hollywood film, you know. So I still feel pretty justified in making those kinds of
every soldier has a beautiful family that's sad when they leave, and it's...
Yeah, the big thing was there's a...
Not that people wouldn't be sad when they leave, but...
There's a thing they lay on to think, or I don't know if that's the way to put it, but that seemed a little bit exaggerated to me, where one of the guy's wives has no control over her kids whatsoever. Where, like, she's in a drive-thru and her kids are like trying to order food, and they're like, "We'll have 25 milkshakes," and she's just like run ragged and losing.
That sounds like Michael Bay.
And losing it, and that seemed real Michael Bay to me. And again, that is tougher to swallow in a thing that says this is a true story. We get to know these real human beings pretty well, I think. There are some wonderful heartfelt moments that I don't feel like are like trying too hard to like tug at your heartstrings, where again it's laid on too thick. There's some really good conversation about why these people feel the need to be here when they're no longer in proper military service. So the idea is, I haven't even talked about the premise of this, the idea is these are ex-soldiers who are hired by a firm or the government or both, I forget, to go to Benghazi and to do like undercover work. And there's a lot of talk about how like we just can't get away from that world because we got so used to it and we don't know how to be civilians, and a lot of that I thought was really interesting. The other thing that I thought was really impressive about this is that they at the very beginning say that that right here, and I almost said during this period, this is 2 years ago, I mean this just happened, that this is the most dangerous place on Earth. You don't want to be in this place, and all the way through it feels like that, and it's horrifying. It's a really scary place, and the Libyans are I mean it's the Libyan. No, but anyway, but and
that movie
they call
ruined them being scared forever.
And they call them not if you see this. They feel like in almost like larger than life wraith-like antagonists the way they're played in this,
like kind of like the Persians in 300.
Yeah, where like we can't be prepared against them because they're obviously they outnumber us, but they're more organized, they're more well prepared, and they want it more than we do because we're basically just here for a paycheck. This is like Vietnam, where nobody believes in the cause. We don't think there's any chance at our actually building a democratic state in Benghazi because we've tried it and it's obviously falling apart and it's basically a no man's land. And when you get to the end of the movie, spoiler alert, we say, and then we deemed it a failed state. And like we shouldn't even be. There's no hope. It's basically what the movie is saying. There's no and so you have people in this who die or get really close to dying for a thing that there is no hope of. And the terrorists have won. They've just completely taken over this state. It's weird for me to talk about this kind of thing because obviously I'm not a big political guy. I don't talk about politics a lot. But I'm sad to say this. I was more interested in this as I almost would be more interested to see a documentary about this than see it dramatized. Because I really liked the visceral nature of it, where I felt like being there with these people, I was having a much better understanding of the situation than I would if I just saw it in the news or I just read a book about it. But I wasn't that interested in this as a fiction, in these people as characters with character arcs in a fiction. And I'm not saying that's handled really horribly. It made me interested in a real life thing that I haven't thought a lot about, and I appreciate it for that. Like, I'm glad I had that.
Sometimes I see movies like that and I get worried. Where like I feel like I'm now invested or interested in this real world thing, and I'm like, but I don't know how much this isn't true. I don't know how much of what they've told me isn't them spinning it or making it more thematically,
From things I've heard, just news I've read, and things I've listened to, the stuff that I would like to know more about is pretty clearly real. Okay. Pretty. I mean, you hear about Benghazi all the time. Yes, it was and probably is still the most dangerous place on earth. So like.
It's the polar opposite of Disney World.
This was in its way really scary, actually. I'm glad I saw it. It was unentertaining because it's not
what it's trying to do.
The kind of thing it is. It's not what it's going for. So yeah, I had a lot of criticisms of this, but I am really glad that I watched it. So thanks for sending this, David. I sure appreciate it. If you would like to send us something to review, and be absolutely certain that we're actually going to tackle it for you on the Omnibus, you can make a one-time $20 donation on Patreon, or you can do that regularly if you really want to. And we already have a few people doing that. We really appreciate you guys. It's amazing that anybody is regularly giving us that sizable of a donation in order to talk about stuff you want us to talk about. Just let us know what you would, before you do that, or when you pledge, rather, let us know what you would like us to tackle, and we'll make sure that it's appropriate and feasible to do that. We very rarely say no. We're doing almost everything, but there are some things that are just impossible to get your hands on, and every now and again there might be something that just doesn't seem real appropriate. But as you can tell, it doesn't have to be necessarily a big genre thing. I just did 13 hours. It isn't like the last thing I would watch. But I want to get outside of my wheelhouse because I learned a lot. So like, I'm really glad I've seen Shogun Assassin now. That feels like a long overdue thing I should have always watched. So
yeah, and it sounds like Wilco was a similar thing.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I appreciated that, partly just discovering that band.
Well, what I was going to say, are you going to now go kind of like through their back catalog? And
I am, yeah. Yeah, and I've been listening to some of it. I like
That's
it a lot.
cool.
I'll play you some after the show.
Cool.